think, yeah, I think maybe it was as part of the just the kind of seeing what public opinion would be on that kind of thing.
But you don't know. That's silly. You know what public opinion would be on an army bombing a hospital. So this is the thing about conspiracy theories that always intrigues me. What do you think the plan was? Because you believed for a while that as someone representing the Israeli government, even though they only bought their blue tick last month, but you can be forgiven for not checking that, he deliberately announced that Israel had bombed a hospital on behalf of the official government of Israel and then deleted it a few minutes later. What was the master plan, do you think, that you fell for? I don't know how big a deal it is. It just seems a rather infelicitous thing to say, doesn't it? It looks like it was the other team. Twitter was appalling last night, and I make no apology for citing Twitter as an example or an exemplar even of the place to go for breaking news. If you think back a year or 2 years, it was wonderful. I mean, it can be an absolute sewer on occasions, but it was so good on breaking news because of the verification system. So you knew that almost everybody who had a blue tick would be working for a reputable news organisation. In the context of bulletins coming from world trouble spots, obviously you also get a blue tick if you're a superstar singer and stuff like that. But if you were looking at claims or reports, or you were looking at tweets claiming to be reports, it was fairly easy to establish whether or not it was coming from somebody who had, credibility. God, it was awful last night. You can't use it anymore to track breaking news, which is odd because we've got so used to using it. It leaves quite a big hole. And some people, when this dreadful hospital explosion, hospital blast started being reported, it was reported as if people knew what they were talking about. It was reported as if the facts had already been established, and the facts still haven't been established. It's 12 hours later, and it is into that confusion that Joe Biden just waded. And listen, Idiot's Corner would be inappropriate today, but if you haven't double, triple, and quadruple checked whatever it is that you are thinking of texting to me, or more importantly, whatever it is you are choosing to believe about this explosion at this hospital, then you are actually doing a grave disservice to the dead, I would suggest. And at the very, very least, we all owe them caution in concluding what has happened. A rush to judgment is often wrong. So I would go as far as to say that you insult the memory of the people who have died by claiming certainty already, by claiming an impossible certainty about what happened. And I had to keep a very even keel throughout the last week and a half. Had to be very, very careful, and rightly so, as we wade into incredibly complicated and heartbreaking territory. But the closest I get to losing my patience, I think, is with people who are insisting that they know exactly what happened in circumstances where it is currently impossible to do so. And I mean, it's odd, isn't it, that we started. I'm not going to get too distracted by this, but clarity is important. I started off this morning talking about how sad it was that you can't rely on Twitter because of the corruption of its verification system by Elon Musk to identify sources that are credible. No one's ever infallible, but sources that are credible as opposed to sources that are clearly not credible. Anybody can buy a blue tick. And this social media influencer who also does some work in the digital department of the Israeli government, that's the claim, I think, that is true. But he's also got his own Patreon account on his Twitter page looking for donations and passing the hat around. So he is absolutely and categorically not an official government spokesman, or even, I would argue, given that he posted that Israel had attacked this hospital and then very quickly deleted it, he's also clearly not a credible source with a bought blue tick. But and this is the point that that Sam makes so well. Everyone's now fixated on who is to blame for yesterday's hospital attack. Surely it's time to think about the horrific loss of life and those suffering. I agree with you, but the argument will rage about who was responsible for the attack forever now, because even if it is conclusively proved that it was X as opposed to Y will claim that X has influenced the investigation, or that Y can't be trusted to conduct an investigation at all. So you're back to the importance of supranational scrutiny, organisations that transcend any loyalty, whether it's tribal or otherwise. But you cannot argue with a straight face that someone who describes himself as a media personality and has a cap, passing his cap around on social media with a paid-for blue tick, would have been speaking officially for the Israeli government last night, deliberately revealing that they'd bombed a hospital and then deleting it. It doesn't fit any narrative, however warped it may be. But of course, a million people or a bazillion people claim that it fits whatever narrative it is that they want it to fit.
I was very quick to look at all the information coming out last night, particularly with that digital media influencer who's been appointed by Netanyahu.
Yeah.
So I think just because I'd been so consumed and so quickly swiping through stuff, I should have taken a step back on that.
Yes.
What I would say,
well,
is
we've all been there. We've all been guilty of that.
Yeah, what I would say on the question of the blast itself is, do Hamas have the kind of artillery to inflict that level of destruction? Looking at Israel's past, strikes on hospitals and things like that. And also, I would hope that the investigation is done by an outside party, because Israel does have a history of, saying it hasn't done something, quietly admitting months later when the world has moved on.
Yes, no, I think you're allowed to say that, but the evidence will be fairly incontrovertible, and when it is finally examined and when it finally emerges. But I don't really want to go down that rabbit hole, and we haven't been having a phone in about who do you trust on the question of what happened last night, for reasons that are fairly obvious in that nobody knows, so everything is an opinion. And as you acknowledge, yours was quite easily swayed by a fairly ridiculous source. So very briefly, what just in your own mind, why would somebody acting on behalf of the Israeli government announce that they'd bombed a hospital and then delete it? What would be the master plan there?
I think maybe it was as part of the kind of seeing what public opinion would be on that kind of thing.
You don't know. That's silly. You know what public opinion would be on an army bombing a hospital. So this is the thing about conspiracy theories that always intrigues me. What do you think the plan was? Because you believed for a while that someone representing the Israeli government, even though they only bought their blue tick last month, but you can be forgiven for not checking that, he deliberately announced that Israel had bombed a hospital on behalf of the official government of Israel and then deleted it a few minutes later. What was the master plan, do you think, that you fell for?
I think I saw a deleted screenshot of that after I'd seen the bombing itself.
Yeah. So what was the master plan by tweeting it and then deleting it from the position of being a member of the Israeli government, which of course he wasn't?
I honestly don't know whether
well, that's the question you've got to ask yourself before you decide that it's persuasive or in any way worth contemplating or considering. You've got to ask yourself what the master plan is.
Considering the amount of bombing that had happened this past week, but we're
not talking about that though. We're talking about a completely unreliable source that you chose to believe, but without really stopping to think about what it was you were choosing to believe.
He wasn't the. It was kind of confirmation. It was kind of confirmation bias.
Yes, that's very honest of you.
After seeing the amount of posts that are coming out.
But again, it's not. I mean, again, you're not addressing the central question, which is that there is no logical explanation of why, even if he was who you believed he was, which he wasn't, he would have done the thing that you think he did. And it wasn't even him, of course, as it's turned out subsequently. It was his wife. On an account that bought a blue tick last month. But there you go. That is the nature of the line, if you like, between misinformation and disinformation. It's misinformation when you fall for it. It's disinformation when you continue to disseminate it despite knowing that it's not true.